The morning started like any other for Tom Wilson, but fate had different plans. As an animal rescue investigator for the past 12 years, he thought he had seen it all. The autumn rain tapped gently against his truck's windshield as he drove down the muddy forest road, following up on an anonymous tip that had come in just before dawn. "There's something about this one," he muttered to himself, checking the hastily scribbled directions on his notepad. The caller's voice had been shaking when they described seeing a dog deep in the woods while hiking. They couldn't get close enough to help, but knew something wasn't right. The old forest road narrowed as Tom ventured deeper into the woods outside Portland. Massive oak trees towered above, their branches creating a natural tunnel that seemed to lead him toward his destination. The rain had softened to a misty drizzle, but the morning air still held a sharp chill that cut through his jacket. Parking his truck where the road ended, Tom grabbed his rescue kit and flashlight. Even though it was morning, the dense canopy above made the forest floor surprisingly dark. The smell of wet earth and decaying leaves filled his nostrils as he carefully made his way through the underbrush, following what looked like a makeshift path. His heart skipped a beat when he first heard it, a faint whimper carried by the wind. Tom had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and something told him this case would be different. As he pushed through a thick patch of ferns, the sight before him stopped him in his tracks. There, tied to an ancient oak tree with weathered rope, was a German shepherd. The dog's ribs showed through his matted fur, and the rope had rubbed his neck raw. But it was the animal's eyes that really got to Tom. They weren't filled with fear or aggression like he usually saw in abandoned dogs. Instead, they held a deep sadness that seemed almost human. "Hey there, buddy," Tom called out softly, keeping his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. Who could do this to an animal? The dog's ears perked up at his voice, but he didn't bark or growl. Another unusual sign that made Tom wonder about this dog's story. Taking slow, careful steps, Tom moved closer, talking quietly the whole time. "You're going to be okay now. I'm here to help." The dog watched him intently, and when Tom was just a few feet away, something unexpected happened. The shepherd's tail gave a slight wag. As Tom knelt down to assess the situation, he noticed more details that didn't fit the usual abandonment case. Despite the dog's current state, his nails weren't overgrown, suggesting he'd been cared for until recently. And there, beneath the cruel rope, was a proper collar, worn but good quality. Carefully, Tom reached out to check the collar, his fingers finding an engraving worn smooth by time. Wiping away the mud, he read a single word that would prove to be the first clue in a much bigger mystery: hero. The rain started picking up again, drumming against the leaves overhead. As Tom worked to free Hero from the rope, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a simple case of abandonment. Everything about the dog, his behavior, his condition, even his location, suggested there was more to the story. "What happened to you, Hero?" Tom wondered aloud as he finally cut through the last bit of rope. The dog stood shakily, pressing against Tom's leg for support. Looking into those soulful eyes again, Tom made a silent promise. He wouldn't just rescue this dog. He would uncover the truth behind how he ended up here. As he helped Hero make his way back to the truck, Tom didn't realize yet that this rainy morning would mark the beginning of one of the most remarkable cases of his career. A case that would remind him why he chose this path in life, and one that would touch the hearts of everyone involved in ways they never expected. Getting Hero into the truck proved to be a gentle challenge. Tom had dealt with countless rescue dogs over the years, and he knew the first few moments of contact could be the most dangerous. But something about this German shepherd was different. There was an intelligence in his eyes that spoke of proper training and human companionship. "Easy does it, big guy," Tom said softly, opening the back door of his rescue vehicle. He'd lined the floor with thick blankets earlier that morning, a habit born from years of experience. Hero looked at the open door, then back at Tom, as if asking permission. That simple gesture told Tom volumes about the dog's background. This wasn't a stray or a dog that had lived its life on a chain. This was a well-trained companion who had somehow ended up in terrible circumstances. The rain continued to fall as Hero carefully climbed into the truck, his movements slow and deliberate. Tom noticed how the dog favored his right side, adding another piece to the puzzling story. Once inside, Hero didn't sprawl out on the blankets as most exhausted dogs would. Instead, he sat with remarkable dignity, despite his obvious fatigue and discomfort. Tom reached for his emergency kit and pulled out a bottle of water and a collapsible bowl. "You must be thirsty," he said, pouring the water carefully. Hero watched the water flow but didn't lunge for it. He waited until Tom placed the bowl down and nodded slightly, another sign that made Tom's heart ache. This dog hadn't just been trained, he'd been loved. As Hero drank slowly and carefully, Tom took the opportunity to examine him more closely. Beyond the obvious signs of neglect, the matted fur, the rope burns, the protruding ribs, there were other details that caught his experienced eye. There were small patches of fur that had grown back differently, suggesting recent healing from injuries. The dog's paws, despite his current state, showed signs of regular care in the not-too-distant past. "What's your story, Hero?" Tom wondered aloud, reaching slowly to check the dog's ears. To his surprise, Hero leaned into his touch, letting out a small sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his recent ordeal. The trust this animal showed, even after whatever he'd been through, was remarkable. Tom pulled out his phone and started documenting Hero's condition, a necessary but heartbreaking process. Each photo told part of the story: the rope burns around his neck, the healing scratches on his sides, the way his fur had become tangled and matted. But it was when Tom tried to take a front-view photo that something extraordinary happened. Hero looked directly into the camera, and his expression was so profound that Tom had to lower his phone for a moment. There was no fear in those eyes, no aggression, just a deep, almost human-like sadness mixed with what Tom could only describe as hope. In all his years of rescue work, he'd never seen anything quite like it. Starting the truck, Tom checked his rearview mirror. Hero had finally settled onto the blankets, though he maintained a kind of alertness that spoke of his training. "First stop is the vet," Tom said, more to himself than to Hero, but the dog's ears perked up at his voice. "We'll get you checked out, get you cleaned up, and then we'll figure out how you ended up in those woods." As they drove through the rain-swept forest, Tom's mind was already racing with possibilities. The collar with its simple engraving, the clear signs of previous care, the impeccable training that showed through even in Hero's weakened state, none of it added up to a simple abandonment case. In his experience, when things didn't add up, there was usually a bigger story waiting to be uncovered. The drive to the veterinary clinic would take about 40 minutes, and Tom used that time to make some calls. He had contacts at local shelters, training facilities, and veterinary offices. Someone somewhere must know something about this remarkable dog. As he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that Hero's story would turn out to be unlike any he'd encountered before. Looking in the rearview mirror again, he saw that Hero had dozed off, though his ears still twitched at every new sound. "Don't worry, buddy," Tom said quietly, "we're going to figure this out." And as the wipers swept away the rain, he made a silent promise to uncover the truth behind those sad, knowing eyes. The veterinary clinic was already busy when Tom pulled into the parking lot, but he'd called ahead, and Dr. Beth was waiting for them. She'd been working with rescue animals for over 15 years, and Tom trusted her judgment more than anyone else's when it came to complicated cases like this one. "How bad is it?" she asked, stepping out into the rain with the veterinary technician. Her expression changed as soon as she saw Hero through the truck's window. There was something about the dog's demeanor that made everyone pause, a quiet dignity that somehow shone through despite his condition. "Let's get him inside," Dr. Beth said softly, opening the truck's back door. Hero looked at Tom first, waiting for reassurance. It was another small gesture that spoke volumes about his training and character. Tom nodded, and Hero carefully stepped down from the truck, still favoring his right side. Inside the examination room, the fluorescent lights revealed details that the forest's dim light had hidden. Hero's fur, beneath the mud and tangles, was actually a rich black and tan, suggesting he'd once been a magnificent-looking animal. Dr. Beth's gentle hands moved methodically over him, checking vital signs and looking for immediate concerns. "He's definitely dehydrated," she noted, "but he's letting me examine him without any resistance. That's unusual for a dog who's been through trauma." She paused at his neck, carefully parting the fur around the rope burns. "We'll need to clean these wounds and start him on antibiotics. But first, let's check for a microchip." The scanner beeped almost immediately, surprising everyone in the room. "Well, look at that," Dr. Beth said, her eyes lighting up. "He is chipped. This could help us piece together his story. She wrote down the number, but her expression changed as she continued the examination. Tom, come look at this, she called, running her hands along Hero's ribcage. Feel these healed fractures. And here, she pointed to several spots where the fur grew in different patterns. These are surgical scars, and they're not that old. Someone invested in this dog's medical care, and recently too. As they worked, Hero remained remarkably cooperative, only flinching slightly when Dr. Beth touched particularly tender spots. The veterinary technician carefully cleaned the rope burns while Dr. Beth drew blood for testing. His nails, she observed, they're worn down naturally, not overgrown. He was walking regularly until quite recently. And look at his teeth, someone was brushing them. This isn't a case of long-term neglect. The blood work results would take time, but the immediate tests revealed more of Hero's story. His blood pressure was lower than it should be, and he was running a slight fever. X-rays showed the healed fractures more clearly, and there was evidence of high-quality veterinary work in his past. Whoever owned this dog before took excellent care of him, Dr. Beth said, studying the X-rays. These pins in his back leg, that's specialized orthopedic work. It would have cost thousands of dollars. She turned to Tom with a puzzled expression. Something doesn't add up here. How does a dog that received this kind of care end up tied to a tree in the woods? Tom shared her confusion. He'd been making calls while Hero was being examined, but so far none of his usual contacts had any information about a missing German Shepherd matching Hero's description. The microchip should help, he said, watching as Hero received his first round of antibiotics. I'll start making inquiries as soon as we have the registration information. Dr. Beth prescribed a careful feeding schedule to help Hero regain his strength safely. We need to be careful about refeeding syndrome, she explained. He hasn't been starved for too long, which is good news, but we still need to take it slowly. She patted Hero's head gently, and the dog leaned into her touch. He's not just well-trained, he's special. You can see it in how he interacts with people. As they prepared Hero for an overnight stay at the clinic, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something big. The microchip, the expensive medical care, the professional training, all of it pointed to a deeper story, one that had somehow led to this dog's abandonment in the woods. I'll start running the microchip number through the databases, Tom said, giving Hero a final pat. Someone out there knows what happened to him, and I'm going to find out who. Hero watched him with those intelligent eyes, and Tom could have sworn the dog understood every word. As he left the clinic that evening, Tom's mind was racing with questions. Tomorrow, he would begin the real investigation, following the trail of evidence to uncover the truth about Hero's past. Little did he know, the story he was about to uncover would be more remarkable than anything he could have imagined. Morning light was just breaking over the city when Tom arrived at his office, coffee in hand and determination in his heart. He barely slept, his mind turning over the mysteries surrounding Hero. The microchip database had finally sent him the registration information overnight, and he was eager to begin piecing together the puzzle. Opening his laptop, Tom clicked on the email that would begin unraveling Hero's story. As he read, his coffee grew cold, forgotten in his hand. The registration revealed that Hero belonged to a Marine Corps veteran named Ray Thompson. The address listed was in a small apartment complex across town, but when Tom dialed the phone number, he got an automated message saying the line was disconnected. Okay, Hero, Tom muttered to himself, pulling up public records. Let's find out what happened to your family. The more he dug, the more his heart sank. Ray Thompson had been a decorated Marine, serving 3 tours overseas. After his discharge, he'd worked as a construction foreman while training Hero as his service dog. Local news archives painted a clearer picture. There was a small article from 8 months ago about Ray winning a community award for his work with veteran support groups. The photo showed him standing proudly with Hero at his side, the German Shepherd looking healthy, alert, and every bit the professional service dog. Tom studied the image, noting how Hero stayed perfectly positioned beside his handler, their bond evident even in a still photograph. But then the trail grew darker. Medical bills began piling up. Tom found court records of payment plans and negotiations. Ray had suffered a severe injury on a construction site, leading to multiple surgeries. The insurance company was disputing the claims, leaving Ray caught in a nightmare of paperwork and mounting debt. Tom's phone rang, interrupting his research. It was Dr. Beth from the vet clinic. "You need to see this," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I've been going through Hero's x-rays again. The specialized surgery he had. It's a specific technique used for service dogs. The pins in his leg, they're designed to get working dogs back in action quickly. Hero's not just any dog, he's a trained professional." "I know," Tom replied, staring at his screen. He belonged to a Marine veteran, but something happened and I'm trying to figure out what. He shared what he'd found so far, and Dr. Beth went quiet on the other line. "That explains his behavior," she said finally. "He's not just well-trained, he's still trying to do his job. Even in his weakened state, he's showing all the signs of a service dog. The way he watches people, how he stays positioned, his calm demeanor in the clinic, it's all part of his training." Tom spent the next few hours following paper trails and making calls. Each new piece of information made his chest tighter. 3 months ago, Ray had lost his apartment. The eviction notice cited missed payments, but there was a note in the file about medical emergencies. The building manager remembered them, said Ray and Hero had been model tenants, quiet and respectful. She'd hated having to evict them but had no choice. Around the same time, hospital records showed Ray had been admitted for emergency surgery. Tom found a social worker's report expressing concern about Ray's service dog, noting that temporary arrangements would need to be made. The social worker had followed protocol, contacting a local animal care service to house Hero while Ray was hospitalized. "This is where things went wrong," Tom said to himself, pulling up the records for the care service. The business had shut down abruptly 2 months ago, its owner vanishing amid accusations of fraud. Several families had reported missing pets, but in the chaos of the company's collapse, many records had been lost or destroyed. Tom leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair in frustration. The picture was becoming clearer, but it made his blood boil. Someone at that fraudulent care service had betrayed both Ray and Hero, likely selling the valuable service dog for quick cash. But Hero's training and loyalty had probably made him impossible to resell, leading to his cruel abandonment in the woods. Picking up his phone, Tom dialed the hospital's general number. His voice was steady despite the emotion building in his throat. "This is Tom Wilson from Animal Protection Services. I need information about a patient named Ray Thompson. It's regarding his service dog. We found him." The silence on the other end of the line lasted several heartbeats before the receptionist spoke. "Mr. Thompson? Oh my goodness. He's been asking about his dog every day. He's still here in our rehabilitation wing. He had a stroke during his surgery. He's been so worried about Hero." Tom's hands were shaking as he wrote down the room number. After thanking the receptionist, he sat in silence for a moment, letting the full weight of the situation sink in. A decorated Marine who'd served his country had suffered a devastating series of events, leading to the separation from his faithful companion. But against all odds, that companion had survived, waiting to be found. Standing up, Tom grabbed his keys. He needed to get to the vet clinic, check on Hero, and then make some very important phone calls. This story wasn't over, it was just beginning. He had connections with veteran support groups, and he knew that once they heard this story, they would want to help. Ray and Hero had been torn apart by circumstances, but Tom was determined to make sure their story would have a different ending than the one their enemies had planned. The veterinary clinic was quiet when Tom arrived, early morning sunlight streaming through the windows. Hero perked up immediately at the sight of him, and Dr. Beth had good news to share. The dog's condition was improving steadily after just 1 day of proper care. But Tom's mind was racing with everything he'd discovered about Ray Thompson, and he knew they had to act fast. "I've got some calls to make," Tom told Dr. Beth, pulling out his phone. "But first, I need you to document everything about Hero's condition. Every detail matters now. We're not just dealing with animal abandonment anymore. This is fraud, and it involves a veteran's service dog." The first call went to Pete Anderson at the local Veterans Support Alliance. Tom had worked with Pete before on cases involving veterans and their pets, but this situation was different. As Tom explained what he'd discovered, Pete's voice grew increasingly concerned. A service dog sold off while its owner was having emergency surgery. Pete's voice crackled with anger over the phone. "That's not just cruel, it's illegal. Give me an hour, I'll make some calls. We take care of our own." Tom spent the next few hours building his case. He visited the now empty offices of the Pet Care Service, taking photos of the abandoned space. A neighbor mentioned seeing people loading animals into vans late at night before the business suddenly closed. Every new detail added to the growing evidence of a calculated scheme. Back at his office, Tom spread out everything he'd gathered: photographs, documents, medical records, and newspaper clippings. The story they told was heartbreaking. Ray Thompson had done everything right. He'd worked hard, served his country, trained his service dog properly, and built a new life. Then a workplace injury had started a chain reaction that tore it all apart. A knock at his door interrupted Tom's thoughts. It was Linda from the district attorney's office. He'd called her earlier about the case. She took one look at the evidence spread across his desk and pulled up a chair. "Walk me through it," she said, pulling out a notepad. Tom started from the beginning, showing her how the Pet Care Service had taken in multiple animals, including Hero, before disappearing. The pattern was clear. They had been selling off the pets for quick cash, with no regard for the families left behind. "But here's where it gets interesting," Tom said, pointing to some bank records he'd obtained. "They knew Hero was valuable because of his training. Look at these transactions, large cash deposits right after he was taken in. I think they sold him to someone who wanted a trained German Shepherd, but they didn't count on how strong the bond between a service dog and their owner would be," Linda finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. The buyer probably couldn't handle him and abandoned him when he wouldn't respond to commands. The investigation gained momentum throughout the day. Pete called back with news. Several other veterans had come forward with similar stories about the same Pet Care Service. Their pets had disappeared while they were in the hospital or away for treatment. Tom visited the apartment complex where Ray had lived, showing Hero's photo to residents. An elderly neighbor remembered them well. "Such a good dog," she said, wiping away tears. "Always so gentle, helping Ray with everything. When they lost their apartment, it broke my heart. Ray was trying so hard to keep things together." As Tom pieced together the final details, his phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Beth. Hero's blood work had come back, showing evidence of sedatives in his system, proof that he'd been drugged during his ordeal. The vet had documented everything, building an airtight case against whoever was responsible. By late afternoon, Tom had a clear picture of what had happened. The fraudulent Pet Care Service had targeted vulnerable people, especially those who were hospitalized or facing emergencies. They had sold the animals quickly, probably to buyers who didn't ask questions. But Hero, with his specialized training and deep bond with Ray, had proven impossible to control. Rather than return him or risk exposure, they had taken the cruelest option, abandoning him in the woods, tied to a tree. They'd probably thought he wouldn't survive long enough to be found. They hadn't counted on his training, his will to live, or the anonymous tip that had led Tom to him. "We've got enough to move forward," Linda said, gathering the evidence into her briefcase. "Multiple counts of fraud, animal cruelty, theft of a service animal. These are serious charges. We'll find the people responsible." Tom nodded, but his mind was already on the next step. The criminal case would proceed, but right now, he had a more important task: reuniting Hero with Ray. The veteran had been asking about his dog every day, and tomorrow, Tom would finally be able to give him some good news. Looking at the photo of Ray and Hero at the community award ceremony, Tom felt a surge of determination. The people who had tried to destroy this partnership would face justice, but more importantly, a faithful service dog would finally return to the person who needed him most. Sometimes, Tom thought, the most important victories weren't about catching the bad guys. They were about putting broken pieces back together. The rehabilitation center was buzzing with quiet activity as Tom walked through the front doors, his heart pounding with anticipation. Dr. Beth had given Hero a final checkup that morning, amazed at how quickly he'd bounced back with proper care. The rope burns were healing, his strength was returning, and most importantly, his spirit remained unbroken. "I'll take you to Mr. Thompson's room," the floor nurse said softly, leading the way. "We told him someone was coming to discuss his dog, but we didn't say more. We weren't sure if—" She paused, emotion catching in her voice. "He asks about Hero every day. It's been so hard, not knowing what to tell him. Tom nodded, understanding the nurse's caution. In his line of work, he'd learned that hope could be a double-edged sword. But today, hope would prove stronger than all the hardships that had come before. Outside Ray's room, Tom paused to gather his thoughts. Through the door's window, he could see a man sitting in a wheelchair near the room's single window. Even from behind, Tom could tell the stroke had affected Ray's left side. His arm rested motionless in his lap. But his right hand was active, thumbing through what looked like photographs. The nurse knocked gently before opening the door. "Mr. Thompson, you have a visitor." Ray turned his wheelchair slowly, and Tom's breath caught in his throat. The man in front of him was younger than he'd expected, probably in his early 40s. The recent hardships had left their mark. His face bore the tired lines of someone who had fought too many battles, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Mr. Thompson," Tom began, pulling up a chair to sit at eye level. "My name is Tom Wilson. I'm from Animal Protection Services, and I'm here about Hero." The change in Ray's expression was immediate. His right hand gripped the armrest of his wheelchair, and his voice, though affected by the stroke, carried the strength of desperate hope. You found him? Is he? He's alive," Tom said quickly, pulling out his phone to show Ray the latest photos of Hero at the vet clinic. "We found him 4 days ago. He's been getting medical care, and he's doing well. Very well, actually." Ray's hand shook as he took the phone, tears falling freely as he swiped through the photos. "They told me. They said he ran away," he managed, his voice breaking. "The pet care service. They said they looked everywhere. I knew he wouldn't run. Hero would never." "You were right," Tom assured him, giving Ray a moment to compose himself. "He didn't run away. We've uncovered what really happened, and the people responsible will face charges. But right now, there's someone who really wants to see you, if you're feeling up to it." Ray's head snapped up from the phone. "He's here, now." Tom nodded, standing up. "He's waiting just down the hall with Dr. Beth, our veterinarian. She's been caring for him, and she'd like to talk to you about his recovery. But first," he moved to the door, looking back at Ray. "Are you ready?" The nurses had gathered quietly in the hallway, all of them aware of what was about to happen. Dr. Beth stood at the end of the corridor, Hero sitting perfectly at her side. The German Shepherd's transformation over the past few days had been remarkable. His coat was clean and brushed, his wounds were healing, and his eyes were bright with renewed energy. "Hero," Tom called softly, and the dog's ears perked forward. "Look who's here." As Hero looked down the hallway, his entire body went still. His nose lifted, testing the air, and then, in a moment Tom knew he would never forget, the dog's training melted away into pure joy. Hero's tail began to wag, slowly at first, then with increasing energy. Ray wheeled himself into the doorway, and the sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Hero? Come here, buddy. Come here." The dog didn't run. Despite his obvious excitement, he maintained his service dog discipline, walking quickly but calmly to Ray's side. Only when he reached the wheelchair did his professional demeanor crack completely. Hero pressed his head into Ray's lap, whining softly as Ray's right hand found the familiar spot behind his ears. "I'm sorry," Ray whispered, bending down to press his face into Hero's fur. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I tried to find you. I never stopped trying." The hospital staff watched with tears in their eyes as man and dog reunited. Hero kept pressing closer, as if trying to erase all memory of their separation. His tail waved so hard his whole body shook, but he was careful, so careful, of Ray's weaker left side. Dr. Beth stepped forward after a few minutes, wiping her own eyes. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to talk to you about Hero's care going forward." And she glanced at Tom with a smile, "about some people who want to help make sure you two never have to be apart again." Ray looked up, his face wet with tears but brightened by the first real smile Tom had seen from him. Hero sat pressed against the wheelchair, his head resting on Ray's knee, exactly where he had been trained to be. But this wasn't about training anymore. This was about two souls finding their way back to each other against all odds and despite every obstacle thrown in their path. As Tom watched them together, he knew that this story would stay with him forever. In his years of rescue work, he'd seen many reunions, but there was something special about this one. It wasn't just about a man getting his dog back. It was about healing, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a veteran and the faithful companion who had never stopped being his hero. 3 weeks after the emotional reunion, Tom stood in the doorway of Ray's new apartment, watching with a smile as Hero helped his owner unpack boxes. The German Shepherd carefully carried small items to Ray, who was getting stronger every day. Physical therapy was working wonders, and having Hero back by his side had given Ray a renewed sense of purpose. The story of Ray and Hero had touched hearts across the community. Once the local veterans groups heard about what happened, they sprang into action. A fundraising campaign had raised enough money to cover Ray's outstanding medical bills and secure this pet-friendly apartment in a good neighborhood. The apartment complex owner, a veteran herself, had been moved by their story and offered reduced rent. "Still can't believe all this," Ray said, looking around the sunny living room. His speech had improved dramatically since Hero's return, something his therapists attributed to the positive effects of having his service dog back. "Keep thinking I'm gonna wake up and find out it's all a dream." Hero padded over to Ray's side, pressing against his leg right on cue. The dog's intuitive understanding of Ray's needs had only grown stronger since their reunion. When Ray's left side bothered him, Hero was there for support. When frustration set in during therapy sessions, Hero's calm presence helped Ray focus and push through. The district attorney called this morning, Tom said, helping Ray unpack a box of kitchen items. "They've arrested the main people behind that pet care scam. Turns out you and Hero weren't the only ones affected, but your case helped break it wide open. They're facing serious charges." Ray nodded, his hand absently finding Hero's ears, a gesture that had become even more frequent since their reunion. "Good, not for revenge, you know. Just don't want anyone else going through this, not veterans, not anybody." The investigation had revealed a larger scheme than anyone initially suspected. The fraudulent pet care service had targeted vulnerable people across 3 counties, selling off pets for quick profit. But Hero's story had created enough media attention to bring other victims forward, leading to multiple arrests. The Veterans Support Network wants to start a program, Tom mentioned, watching as Hero brought Ray another item to unpack. They're calling it the Hero Project. It'll help veterans keep their pets during medical emergencies, make sure nothing like this happens again. Ray's eyes brightened at this news. Once he was stronger, he planned to volunteer with the program himself. His experience had shown him how crucial it was to protect the bond between veterans and their service animals. "Hero's gonna help train the volunteers," he said with pride. "Show 'em what a real service dog can do." The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as they continued unpacking. The apartment was coming together nicely, with donations from local community members helping to replace what Ray had lost. A new orthopedic bed for Hero sat in the corner, though Tom suspected it would rarely be used. The dog still preferred to sleep near Ray's bed, ready to help at a moment's notice. Dr. Beth stopped by later with supplies and a clean bill of health for Hero. The physical signs of his ordeal had healed, leaving only some small scars hidden under his now glossy coat. "He's back to his ideal weight," she reported happily, "and his energy levels are perfect for a working dog his age." As if to demonstrate, Hero trotted over to the door where Ray had hung his service dog vest. The dog nosed it gently, then looked back at his owner. It was almost time for Ray's physical therapy session, and Hero hadn't forgotten their schedule. "That's my boy," Ray said softly, his voice full of emotion. "Never misses a beat, does he?" Tom watched as Ray attached the vest with practiced movements, his left hand now strong enough to help with the buckles. Hero stood perfectly still, but his tail wagged gently. He loved having his job back, being able to help his person again. The transformation in both of them over the past few weeks had been remarkable. Ray's determination in physical therapy, combined with Hero's unwavering support, had accelerated his recovery beyond the doctor's expectations. The dark days of separation were behind them, replaced by hope and purpose. As Ray and Hero prepared to leave for therapy, Tom caught a glimpse of the framed photo on the wall, the one from the community award ceremony, now joined by a new picture of their reunion at the hospital. The contrast between the 2 images told their whole story: partnership, loss, resilience, and renewal. "You know," Ray said, pausing at the door with Hero at his side, "when I was in the hospital, feeling like I'd lost everything. I never thought I'd be standing here, having Hero back, this new place, all these people helping." He shook his head, emotion making his voice rough. "It's like getting a second chance at life." Tom smiled, understanding exactly what Ray meant. In his years of animal rescue work, he'd seen many endings, some happy, some sad. But this one was special. It wasn't just about saving a dog or solving a crime. It was about restoring faith, rebuilding lives, and reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, hope and loyalty could light the way forward. As he watched Ray and Hero head down the hallway together, the veteran walking tall despite his lingering limp, the dog moving in perfect sync with his partner, Tom knew that their story would continue to inspire others. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from the battles we fought, but from the bonds we refused to let break.